Hello friends! If you're watching this, you're probably like me and ever so ready to welcome early autumn. I spent this morning watching Vampire Diaries and eating pumpkin spice oatmeal. The days are getting a bit shorter and my heart feels like it's going home. Gilmore Girls, Harry Potter, and Twilight marathons with cozy sweaters and fuzzy socks, crisp air and the sound of wind in the trees as the leaves fall under feet, studying in libraries and visiting quaint bookshops with a warm drink in hand, candles that smell of old books, and evenings spent watching Practical Magic and Hocus Pocus. So today I'm going to share some recommendations to help you feel autumn. I have recommendations for movies, TV shows, podcasts, activities, recipes, and my favorite fall playlist. Before we get started, I am working with an amazing sponsor on this video. The brand is Vivaya, and they make the most beautiful shoes, specifically the most beautiful shoes to wear during autumn. Vivaya is a sustainable footwear brand that creates eco-friendly, elegant, and comfortable footwear from recycled plastic bottles and natural materials. They've just recently released these beautiful Aria 5-degree pointed ballet flats. I've personally never really been a ballet flat type of girl because I usually don't find them very comfortable. So you can trust me when I say these are the most comfortable flats I have ever had the pleasure of wearing. They are extremely lightweight and comfortable due to the science that has gone into crafting them. I could easily wear them all day, rain or shine. They they repel water, dirt, and oil. Many traditional waterproof shoes actually have a film on the top that can cause your feet to become sweaty. But the Aria 5 Freely uses this recycled fiber yarn that creates this wonderful breathability so your feet don't get as sweaty. I got them in cream, but there are a lot of different colors you can choose from. They're so timeless and elegant, but also practical and is so comfortable for everyday wear, which that's what I think makes Vivaya such an amazing shoe brand. They also have added this heel padding that is like a comfortable pillow for your ankles, and there's a shock absorbing sole to relieve tension in your feet. They're so lightweight and designed to be like a second skin, and they've also added a wider toe box for a more ergonomic design that won't squeeze your feet like a lot of traditional flats do. They really do provide a sneaker-like comfort packaged in an elegant ballet flat. I've also got these square-toed heeled Oxfords. I think Oxfords are so quintessential for fall. I love the style of the heel and how vintage they look, as well as these lace-up heeled boots. To me, these are very reminiscent of a Victorian style boot. And I love that these are crafted using wool and recycled bottles. So because of the wool, they're really going to provide a high level of warmth on those really cold, blustery autumn days. If you are looking to acquire a new pair of shoes for autumn, you can use my discount code for 15% off your purchase. And I have all of the shoes that I got and my sizes linked down in the description box. Starting off with the books, my first recommendation is one that I read last autumn in a cemetery on an early Saturday morning after getting pumpkin spice donuts. It was light drizzling, and so I do recommend reading this one more on like a blustery day, and that is Cackle by Rachel Harrison. This has Gilmore Girls small town vibes set during autumn. It's witchy, it's cozy. There's also spiders, a spider that can be like the size of the spider in Harry Potter. So if you're not a huge spider person, this might be a little bit much for you. It's about a girl named Annie who moves to a brand new, small, quaint little town where everybody knows each other, which is kind of what gives me the Stars Hollow vibes. And she meets this extremely beautiful, elegant woman who lives on the outskirts of town in this beautiful cottage, and the townsfolk seem to be like a little bit weary of her. There is romance in this book, but at the center it's about friendship and self-acceptance, self-love. To me, it just really exudes cozy autumnal vibes. The next book that I have to recommend is Anatomy: A Love Story by Dana Schwartz. This is a spooky Scottish historical fiction with a side of romance. If you've read the Stalking Jack the Ripper series, it kind of is like Stalking Jack the Ripper meets Frankenstein. It's set in Edinburgh in the early 1800s. It's full of gothic, dark academia vibes, grave robbing, resurrection men, kissing in cemeteries. Hazel wants to be a surgeon, but the man teaching these classes refuses to teach a girl, of course. So she sneaks into a presentation by a very well-known surgeon, and she makes a deal with him that if she can pass her tests, he will take her on as his own personal apprentice. But she can't learn and pass her tests without having bodies to practice on. So she meets Jack, who is a resurrection man, which is basically a person who would dig up bodies from graves and sell them to doctors and med students and these people who want to learn anatomy hands-on. But while Jack is helping Hazel, some of his other friends who are also resurrection men go missing. It's blurbed on the back saying, "Diabolically delightful, a love story, a murder mystery, and a horror novel, all bound up together in ghoulish stitches." And then I have a book that is so near and dear to my heart. It's one of my favorite books that I've read all year, and that is A Far Wilder Magic by Alison Saft. This is probably the most autumnal book on this list, besides one more that I have coming up in a second. This is a novel that I didn't know that I needed. It is so visually atmospheric, it's haunting, it has such gorgeous prose and a science-based magic system, which I think is so cool. There's alchemy and a magical fox hunt. Don't worry though, it's not a real fox. It's kind of more like a spirit fox. I haven't fallen so completely in love with a book the way I have with this one in a really long time. I was up all night when I finished it. I was crying because I didn't want it to be over. Margaret is an extremely talented sharpshooter, and she wants to enter the Half Moon Hunt because if she can kill the Hollow, which is this mystical fox, she thinks that it will bring her mom back because her mom has been on this trip, promised she would come back, but it's been months, and Margaret is wondering if she's not good enough. She just really wants to prove herself, but to enter the hunt, she needs to have an alchemist because you have to compete in a team. So she meets Wes, who is studying to become an alchemist, but he's not quite there yet, and together they make this unlikely team. It says, as the hunt looms closer and tensions rise, Margaret and Wes uncover dark magic that could be the key to winning the hunt if they survive that long. I said that there was one more book on this list that is probably even more autumnal and just the epitome of the perfect book to read during fall. This one has a setting of Salem meets Sleepy Hollow meets Halloween Town, and that is The Girl in White by Lindsay Currie, or Currie. Oh my gosh, I just realized I don't know how to say Lindsay's last name. Lindsay, if you're watching this, I'm so sorry. In this story, we have Eastport, Massachusetts, and it is a very haunted little town. So the residents live basically every day like it's Halloween. This spooky seaside town relies on these legends and stories that have been passed down from generations. They're not just any legends though, they are ghost stories, one of which might be more real than the residents think. The specific legend is the curse of Sweet Molly. The legend goes, Sweet Molly once lived in Eastport. Sweet Molly once loved the sea. Sweet Molly lost Liam to the shadows. Now Sweet Molly is coming for ye. I'm gonna read you the first paragraph because when I read this, I knew already this was gonna be like a 5-star read for me. Today is October 1st. It barged in on a gust of chilly air with red and orange leaves on its heels. Morning fog settled over our narrow streets like a cold, wet blanket, and everyone, and I mean everyone, is already wearing their chunkiest sweaters. For most people I know, October isn't just the end of t-shirts and flip-flops. It's the beginning of the best month of the year, Halloween month, the time when Eastport comes to life. I can officially say this is my favorite spooky middle grade book ever. And that's saying a lot because up until now, The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman has held that spot. You know how they say, write the book that you want to read? If I was a writer, this would be the book that I write that, in my opinion, is just all-encompassing autumn vibes. I'm not usually that type of person that will say, you need to read this, because I don't like telling people what to do because I don't know your reading tastes and I don't want to tell you you need to do something. But if I was going to say that you need to read a book during fall, it would be this one. The final book that I have to recommend is The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston, or Poston. Someone told me that this is like Gilmore Girls meets the Addams Family, and I can wholeheartedly agree and get behind that. It really feels exactly like that. This one isn't specifically set during autumn, but the story is very much about ghosts. There are crows and cemeteries and a funeral home, and it just very much feels like a book that you would read or gravitate towards during autumn. This is a paranormal romance. One person in the relationship is a human who is alive and the other person is a ghost. Doesn't that just sound so good already? Florence is a ghostwriter for a very well-known romance author. But after an extremely awful breakup, she is struggling to continue writing romance because she believes romance is dead. But her new editor, Ben, tells her she needs to get a new manuscript to him ASAP. But Florence ends up having to rush home because her father dies. Her and her father had this extra special connection because they could both see ghosts. Her family runs a funeral home, and while she's there making funeral arrangements for her dad, Ben shows up, her editor, but instead of being there in person, he's a ghost. Florence knows that it's usually her job to help the ghosts make peace with the fact that they have died and help them to be able to move on. But instead of moving on, Ben decides that he wants to stay to help her finish her manuscript. But this is a romance, so it does have a happy ending. And that's what kept me reading late into the night, because I had to know, how could they possibly have a happy ending when he's a ghost? And she's not. But boy, did this deliver the happiest, most satisfying ending that was really well fleshed out. It wasn't abrupt. We got to really live in it and enjoy it. I will say this is one of my favorite endings to a romance novel ever. Like I said, it's not specifically set during fall, but between seeing and talking with ghosts, a family who used to live in their funeral home, a small town where everybody knows each other, midnight walks through graveyards. It's the perfect cozy fall romance. So now let's move on to TV shows. The first show that I have to recommend is Wednesday, which is a new Netflix adaptation directed by Tim Burton about one of our favorite characters, Wednesday Addams. She's finally getting her own show, which I'm so excited about. Now, I can't fully recommend this because I haven't seen it yet. It's not being released until this fall. From what I've read online, Wednesday is being called a mix of fantasy, horror, mystery, comedy, all put together in a coming-of-age story for Wednesday. It will follow Wednesday as a student at Nevermore Academy. The official synopsis by Netflix says that it will follow Wednesday's attempts to master her emerging psychic ability, thwart a monstrous killing spree that has terrorized the local town, and solve the supernatural mystery that embroiled her parents 25 years ago, all while navigating her new and very tangled relationships at Nevermore Academy. It's going to consist of 8 episodes, and being directed by Tim Burton, I think it's going to be really good. The next show that I have to recommend is one that I re-recommend every year because it just does not get more autumnal and cozy than Gilmore Girls. I will keep recommending the show until I die. It is quintessential small town vibes, pumpkins on the street, drinking warm coffee, studying at school, crisp leaves on the ground. It's set in the fictional town of Stars Hollow, which is in Connecticut. It has all of the fall New England vibes. The relationship between mother and daughter is so wholesome. Actually, that's just the best way to describe the show, is extremely wholesome and cozy. The next show that I have to recommend is And Then There Were None, which is a BBC mini-series adaptation of Agatha Christie's book And Then There Were None. It's about these 12 guests who get invited to this island. When they arrive, they realize the person that invited them is not there. But on the table, there's this poem of the 10 little soldier boys. But in this poem, every line, a new soldier boy dies. And while they're on this island waiting to be able to leave the next day because they don't even know why they got invited there in the first place, people start dying and they don't know who the killer is. So it's very much a murder mystery. It has old English vibes with like this kind of dreary island. I love the fashion. It is very atmospheric. And this is great if you don't want to commit to a long TV show because there are only 2 episodes. It's really kind of like a long movie. Really perfect for those of you who are into murder mysteries. My next recommendation is one that I think is a bit underrated because I know it's good and popular, but still I feel like it doesn't get the hype it deserves, and that is Only Murders in the Building. This one stars Selena. I was gonna say Selena and Steve Martin at the same time. It stars Selena Gomez, Steve Martin, and Martin Short. Essentially, it's about these 3 strangers who all share a love for true crime, specifically a podcast that they each listen to every week. And throughout some events, they come together and realize they've all been listening to this podcast, and they engage in conversation about where they think it might be going and kind of trying to figure it out themselves. Ironically, while this is happening, they get wrapped up in their own true crime case, and they decide to start their own podcast. But they soon realize that a killer might be living among them, and that's when things get really real. It's really fun. It's set in the Upper West Side of New York City. I love shows that are set during fall in New York. They're very cozy. So if you're into true crime and you haven't watched this one yet, I think you would really enjoy it. My next recommendation is very much a classic, kind of like Gilmore Girls, and that is Vampire Diaries. This is perfect for those of you who are diehard Twilight fans like I am. It's very much the tried and true story of boy meets girl. Boy is a vampire, girl is a human. She doesn't realize he's a vampire. It's set on the East Coast, and although not all of it takes place during autumn, it does take place during the school year, so it does kind of have that like back to school feeling, which is perfect for this time of year. There are graveyards. The town is investigating these unspeakable killings that have been going on, where people are found with their blood completely drained, and they think that there's this animal in the woods, but really, of course, it is one of the vampire brothers, Stefan and Damon. Of course, there's a love triangle between Stefan and Damon and Elena. It is such a binge-worthy show. It gives me that feeling that I had when I read Twilight. So if you're really into vampires, or if you love Twilight and you've never watched Vampire Diaries, give it a go. I think you would really enjoy it. Okay, so now let's move on to movies. The first movie that I have to recommend is so perfect if you love murder mysteries and kind of like dark academia fashion and like big mansions in the countryside. It is fall, there are leaves all over the ground, and if you've never seen it, it's the type of mystery that just blows your mind, and that is Knives Out. I would recommend this movie purely based on the aesthetic alone. It very much screams old money, dark academia. It also has an amazingly talented cast. It's about this author named Harlan Thrombey who mysteriously dies while his family is all gathered together. So this detective shows up and he knows that there is something wildly off about this dysfunctional family, and so he pegs everyone as a suspect. So he has to sift through everybody's lies and get to the center of this mystery, and it is so intriguing and is so interesting to try and follow his thought process and try to figure out who's lying and who's telling the truth. It is so good. My next recommendation that I have for movies is Hocus Pocus 1 and 2. The second very anticipated sequel is coming out September 30th. And with it having all three of the Sanderson sisters, the actresses who played them in the first one, I just know it's going to be phenomenal. The first movie is about Max, who moves to Salem, Massachusetts, starting a new school and learning about these legends. Of course, not believing these stories and legends, he goes to this abandoned house on Halloween night, and he decides that he wants to light the black flame candle to bring back the witches. By doing so, he accidentally frees this coven of 3 sisters. They are evil witches, and from there the adventure begins. Max and his little sister and his new friend and kind of love interest Alison have to steal the witch's book of spells to prevent them from becoming immortal. It all takes place on Halloween night. It's the movie to watch on Halloween, leading up to Halloween if you want to feel those spooky vibes. And we just got a trailer for the second Hocus Pocus movie. It's about 3 young girls who accidentally bring back the Sanderson sisters. The official synopsis says they come back to modern day Salem and the girls must figure out how to stop the child-hungry witches from wreaking havoc on the world. The next one that I have to recommend is one that I showed myself watching on my Instagram stories last year, and I had never received so many DMs asking what I was watching, and that is Monster House. This one is also perfect for fans of more spooky movies, but it also has these beautiful scenes of leaves falling off the trees and pumpkins, creepy houses. So beautiful, but also like so creepy at the same time. It's about these 3 kids who become convinced that this house is alive, and they're very scared of this old man who lives there. They believe that this house is meaning to cause people harm if they step on the lawn or if they even get near the house. So with Halloween coming up soon, these three friends try to find a way to destroy the house before trick-or-treaters try to approach, because who knows what could happen to them if this house really does have evil intentions. It's definitely spooky. I like to watch this one on Saturday mornings when I get my pumpkin spice donuts, like Saturday morning cartoons. Because it's animated, I'll watch like Scooby-Doo and Monster House, and then maybe some episodes of The Twilight Zone. My next recommendation is for fans of the Dead Poets Society, and that is Good Will Hunting. I feel like these movies are siblings, the Dead Poets Society and Good Will Hunting. They're just like, they feel so similar. It stars Matt Damon and Robin Williams, which is just an automatic tell that this movie is going to be phenomenal. It's about Will Hunting, who is played by Matt Damon, who is this kind of prodigy. He's extremely smart, has a very high IQ, but chooses to work as a janitor at MIT. One of the professors there does this thing every year where he writes an extremely insane and difficult math equation, puts it on the board out in the hallway, and whichever student can solve it first, I think they like automatically pass the class or something like that. But most of the time the students are not able to figure it out and it goes unsolved. But one afternoon while Will is just doing his janitor duties, he sees it on the wall and just immediately solves it as if it was nothing. So his talents are discovered by the professor, and he kind of wants to help him. He sees him as this misguided youth who he can now direct towards success in being a mathematician. So then when Will is arrested for attacking a police officer, the professor makes a deal with him that he will continue to help guide him if he will go to therapy. And this therapist is Robin Williams. It is a very moving story. It will probably make you cry, but in a good way. I would say Matt Damon and Robin Williams really carry the film, and I love that you see how their characters are very different, but also the same in a lot of ways, and that's kind of why they really get each other. My last movie recommendation is one that I love to rewatch during fall, and that is Runaway Bride. The story is set in a quaint New England town. Actually, is Maryland part of New England? I don't think it is. It's set in a fictional town in Maryland. We've got Julia Roberts and Richard Gere. Julia Roberts plays Maggie, who is kind of infamously known as this woman who leaves grooms at the altar. Up to this point, she has left 3 men, but now she is engaged to her 4th, and she is going to do it this time. She's actually gonna get married. Journalists are starting to write about her being the runaway bride, and Richard Gere, being one of these said journalists, goes up to this town in Maryland to get to know her, investigate a bit, and see if he can get a piece out of any information that he can find. But Maggie is determined to save her reputation, so she's like, fine, come hang out with me in my little small town, get to know my friends, and you won't have a piece. You'll realize that you're wrong, and I'm actually gonna get married this time. You can stay here for the wedding and see for yourself. But I mean, how can you not fall for Julia Roberts? So it's this very, very sweet romantic comedy. This is perfect if you want a romantic comedy to watch during fall, but you've already watched like When Harry Met Sally and You've Got Mail. I think this one is a bit underrated. That is it for all of my movie recommendations. Let's move on to activities. The first activity I have to recommend is to try reading a cozy mystery. And I want to recommend my personal favorite. It is so cozy. Autumnal Gilmore Girls vibes, kind of meets Practical Magic, meets Sabrina the Teenage Witch. It is called In the Company of Witches by Aurelie Wallace. The main character runs a bed and breakfast. So much of the writing talks about curling up by a fire with a good book, or how it's the perfect fall day and the leaves are falling outside. Lots of magic. It's really good. My next recommendation is to go to a farm and try some local apple cider and to pick some apples. If you don't have a farm near you, you could always grab some apples at your local supermarket or farmer's market and try making your own apple cider. Next, you can host a murder mystery dinner party where the dress code is gothic Victorian. I think that would be so fun. Also, you can choose a tree to become your reading tree and read an autumnal book underneath, kind of like how Rory has her tree in Gilmore Girls. Next, you can honor your inner child by making a big leaf pile and jumping in it and playing in it and just letting yourself be a kid. I don't know, I just think there's something so fun about playing in leaves. Another great activity would be to take a walk through a cemetery, read read the headstones or learn some history about your local cemetery. You can even inquire about volunteer opportunities. Cemeteries are often looking for volunteers. Next, one of my personal traditions that I do every October is to wake up early on a Saturday morning, go get some pumpkin spice donuts at a local bakery, and watch Scooby-Doo or any other spooky type of cartoons. Just like Saturday morning cartoons and donuts. It's one of my favorite things to do in autumn. Next, you can go to a bookstore and get a warm fall-themed drink. I don't know why I said book. You can get a fall-themed drink and just browse your bookstore to your heart's content. Next is something I like to do. You can wear an outfit inspired by a character like Wednesday Addams or Rory Gilmore or even one of the Sanderson sisters. Also, you can have a scary movie night and watch a movie like Scream or The Others. One of my personal favorites is scary stories to tell in the dark and try not to get scared. Next, you can go thrifting to try and find a chunky cardigan or sweater. Next, you can do some research and learn about the history and traditions associated with Samhain, which is essentially where our Halloween in America came from. Next, you can start a reread or rewatch of the Harry Potter series. You can make it into an event by baking foods from the book, try to make butterbeer or pumpkin juice. You can listen to the soundtracks from the movies, wear your house colors. Next, if you live somewhere where the leaves change colors, you can go for a nature walk under the fall foliage and then pick up leaves and go home and press them in your journal. If you can't tell by now, I kind of like events and theming days and making little mundane things seem bigger and more magical and spectacular than they seem to be. So I think it would be so fun to have like a dark academia day. You can wear a blazer or tweed pants, loafers or Oxfords, read a dark academia book like The Secret History or read some poetry, drink some Earl Grey tea and go to a library and do some research into a topic that you're really interested in. Walk around a university campus and end your night watching the Dead Poets Society. And my last activity recommendation is to set aside a specific ghost story. So choose it in advance and save it to read on a dark and stormy night by candlelight. I just think they would be a bit magical. Okay, next I have some podcast recommendations. The first one is called It's Always Halloween. I love this podcast because each episode is about a different topic. There are episodes about where Halloween came from, festivals of the dead, Victorian Halloween parties, urban legends, cemeteries. If you're really into Halloween, I highly recommend this one. The next one is called Haunted Places. This is for those of you who are really interested in spooky things and ghost stories. It's dramatized, well, part of it's dramatized, and it takes you through a story. I listened to one that was set at this haunted jail. It was so spooky. We listened to it while driving at night in the dark, and it was so atmospheric. Really, really good. And the last one that I have to recommend is the Comfy Cozy Witch podcast. If you're fans of cozy fall, you will probably love this podcast. I forget the name of the woman who runs the podcast, but one of her first episodes is all about cozy things that make her feel like fall. So she goes into some decor things that she's picked up recently, candle scents, all sorts of things that just make her feel cozy and autumnal. It's just, yeah, it really is the epitome of like a cozy fall podcast. And then I also have some recipes that I want to share. My go-to fall recipe that I make every year, and out of all the recipes that I make this one the most, and it is these pumpkin cream cheese muffins. I cannot stop. I will not stop ever making them. They're so good. They're the perfect blend of cream cheese and chocolate and pumpkin spice. They taste like muffins from the gods. They're so good. Something new that I want to try making this year are these butterbeer cookies from Harry Potter. Well, the cookies aren't from Harry Potter, but like the butterbeer is from Harry Potter. They look so good. They have this like butterscotch syrup on the top. They just look like they would taste so good. I'm gonna leave the recipe links down in the description box. And then another recipe that I think would be so good to make during fall are apple cider donuts. You can get these at a lot of farms around where I live, but why not try making them at home? Especially, could you imagine if you made your own apple cider and used that as the flavoring and the base for the donuts? It would be so fresh and delicious. And then my last recipe is pumpkin bread. I love this because there are so many different ways you can do pumpkin bread, so many different crumbles you can put on top or fillings you can put in. You can do chocolate chips, you can do raisins, you could even do like oatmeal raisin pumpkin. There are so many different ways to make it. And then for music, I do have a fall playlist. It's called Romanticizing Autumn. I will leave it down in the description box. It is on Spotify, but I think if you don't have a Spotify account, you should still be able to view the songs that are on it, and then whatever platform you use for music, like Apple Music or YouTube, you can go add those songs and make your own playlist. To me, they're just songs that invoke the feeling of autumn. Lots of kind of folk, guitar, of course, Taylor Swift. For me, fall isn't fall without Folklore and Evermore. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoy it. Definitely let me know if you have any song recommendations, and I will look through and maybe add some of them to the playlist. So those are all of my recommendations. That was a lot. I hope it wasn't too much, but I hope that somewhere in there you were able to get a recommendation for a new book or a new movie or whatever it might be to help you feel the autumn spirit. I would love to know if you are like me and very much already in the mindset of autumn, or are you still hanging on to summer? I definitely don't believe that one is right over the other. I just believe in people doing what makes them happy. Shifting my mindset to fall already makes my heart happy. If you have any recommendations for me, I would love to hear them. I do have a lot more fall content coming soon. I am so excited about it. I love you guys, and I will see you soon. Bye, friends.